Well, welcome back to Scriptures, and this is the ninth installment of, we're taking a look at the book of 1 Timothy, and my name is Anthony Matrone, stepping in for Pastor Jim today, and this letter from Paul to Timothy, it's been providing instructions to Timothy on the aspects of church, of organizational leadership, qualifications and proper conduct, and he takes a little bit of a look at the false teachers and what to do with them, and so really has been a great study that we've been able to go through. And so today we're going to take a look at chapter 6. Okay, chapter 6 is going to be Paul really getting at issues of the heart. Issues of the heart. So I just want to start with this question: what has your heart today? What are the desires of your heart? What are the things that you are going after? Because Paul is going to start challenging some of those things. He's going to start challenging some of the things that our hearts tend to desire. Things of this world that the Lord would say maybe aren't bad necessarily, but they're not of Him, and they're not Him. And we tend to make idols out of those things. And what really needs to be our focus is the Lord and what He would have for us. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to look at verses 3 through 10 and then jump ahead to 17 through 19 in a moment. And then Pastor Jim will come in the last episode and cover the verses that I don't cover today. So let's jump into verse 3 here. Now, right before this, Paul says to Timothy, he says, teach and insist on these things. Now, he's kind of drawing back, referring to instructions that began in chapter 5, and he's going to continue on here. And he says, if anyone teaches otherwise and does not agree to the sound instruction of our Lord Jesus Christ and to godly teaching, they are conceited and understand nothing. So first off, let's look at this. Anyone teaches otherwise. If anyone teaches otherwise, these are teachings that would contrast what Paul has been instructing Timothy here. So these are the false teachings. We've heard a lot about this over this book. What these false teachers and their motives and the things that they are doing. He goes on to say, does not agree to the sound instruction of our Lord Jesus Christ and to godly teaching. And this is what he says about them. They are conceited. So they're conceited and they understand nothing. So this is important. We want to look at this word conceited. What does conceited mean? This is really ultimately a pride issue because these false teachers, they're more concerned with being right than they are to bringing unity to the church. And Paul talks a lot about unity within the church. And so these people are wanting to bring disunity just so that they can be right and so that they can have more power in leadership. Again, their hearts are in the wrong place. Their hearts aren't after the Lord. They're after power. They're after the right to be right. So we move on to verse 4, and it says, they have an unhealthy interest in controversies and quarrels about words that result in envy, strife, malicious talk, and evil suspicions. So these really are the results of a prideful, conceited heart. We look at envy, right? Envy, what's that? That's wanting something that someone else has. So we envy those people. And with a prideful heart, we have envy in our hearts. And then that causes strife amongst people. And then we talk poorly about people. And then we have evil suspicions about people. We have to be careful that when pride builds up in our heart, we tend towards these things. We tend towards envy. We tend towards strife. And so when there's things happening in our lives that we're allowing pride to build up, we're allowing ourselves to kind of be conceited, we look at life in that way, and then we start to go down this dangerous path for us. So we move on to verse 5, and it says, again, just kind of continuing on, these are the results of a prideful, conceited heart. It says, in constant friction between people of corrupt mind who have been robbed of the truth and who think that godliness is a means to financial gain. How is our godliness a means to gain, a means to financial gain? So he's kind of calling out these false teachers. the one thing that this all kind of comes down to for them is what? It's money, right? They want money based on their godliness. They want financial gain. They want earthly possessions based on their godliness. And this is really where Paul wants to go with this teaching. Remember, it's the presence of false teachers that he's even writing this letter in the first place to Timothy. And these false teachers, they had this one thing on their mind. They had money. And now Paul is going to address this in verse 6. He says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain." Godliness with contentment is great gain. So you get godliness, you get contentment. That's where great gain is. So I want to first, because Paul is going to take a look more at this word contentment, and then we'll get here to gain in a moment here near the end of the chapter. But let's look at contentment. So he says, "For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it." That's a content heart, saying, "Lord, I came into this world with nothing. And Lord, I'm going to leave this world with nothing from the earth. So God, I want you, and I want more of you in my life instead of these earthly things." It should remind us of this verse in Job where it says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." So this means that none of what I have is mine, and none of what I have will go with me on. So we need to stop obsessing over the earthly possessions, because these are the things that end up stealing our hearts. These are the things that our hearts start to desire when we focus on how we can gain in these ways. And sadly, it's not really the world that we live in, is it? We move on, it says, "But if we have food and clothing, we can be content with that." There's that word content again. This is all we need. We need the things that allow us to live and to allow us to go about our calling and reach other people for Jesus and to be content with that. But again, our world isn't like that. Our world is a little bit more like this. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. We see this every single day. We see the gambling addictions, the greed, treating people poorly to climb the corporate ladder, right? There's all this type of stuff that is the norm in our world today. And we even see this in the church. Unfortunately, we see this in the church, but you see this leads to ruin and destruction. This leads to addictions when our hearts desire the things of the world above the Lord. So we must really protect our hearts from this. Then the next slide, and next verse 10, he really gets to the point here, Paul, with Timothy. He says, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." So let's look at this, though, because I think sometimes we look at this verse and it's misconstrued, and it says, money is evil, money's the problem, just ignore money and you'll be okay. Well, that's not really what Paul is saying here, because look at the words. He's saying, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil." So this is what Paul's getting at here. It's the love of it. Money isn't the issue. Money isn't the ultimate problem. It's where your heart is. If your heart is always on money, if your mind is always on money, how can I gain more? Or I don't have enough. That is going to lead us into these many griefs, as he says there. So we must focus our hearts on God. Jesus says it really great here in Matthew 6. He says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So again, we're seeing that even Jesus is saying this is about your heart. It's about the desires of your heart. What are you going after He goes on to say, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And this is so true. Again, what does our heart desire? Does it desire the things of the world, or does it desire to be hungry for the Lord and to be in our word and to be spending time with him and asking the Lord, what is it you want to do with my life? You see Jesus here, even in Paul, that they're getting at this heart issue. Your hunger to serve the Lord must be above all things. Now, you've probably heard about the prosperity gospel over the years. That's kind of infiltrated the church a bit, and it talks a lot about the things on earth that you can gain just by by being blessed by the Lord because you're doing the right things. And really, Paul kind of puts this to bed in these first few verses here, doesn't he? But I think we also need to be careful, because we don't want to go out and take those verses and skip the rest and say, well, it's actually bad for you to have money, and then to go on and shame people that have seen a financial gain in their lives. Because remember, money isn't actually the problem. So we're going to move on to skip ahead to verse 17 here, where it says this: command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. So I want to focus in on this word, arrogant. So he's calling Timothy to teach those that do have money to not be arrogant with that. Because what is arrogance? Arrogance really, in the end, is an identity thing. Okay, it's measuring yourself against others based on the worldly things here. And so we don't want to be arrogant with what we have, but instead put our hope in God, because only he brings enjoyment. It's not the things of this world that are going to ultimately bring us peace and happiness and joy and all those things. It's only our hope in God that will do that for us. So don't be arrogant with your hope, because that basically is saying my identity is wrapped up in this. My identity is wrapped up in my success and in the cars that I own and in my home and all the money that I have in my bank account. That's what my identity is wrapped up in, instead of being wrapped up in the Lord. So be careful not to put your hope into those things, but instead hope in God, for he provides our enjoyment. In verse 18 it says, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. So this is really kind of a stewardship verse right here, because when you are a good steward of your money and your possessions, and you understand that this stuff doesn't belong to me, this belongs to the Lord, and what does he want to do with the things that I have? When we steward our money well, the result is generous. The result is generosity. You see, stewardship equals generosity. When we steward our things well, the outcome of that will be that we can be generous with those that are in need or that could use our help. We want to make sure that we're always being a good steward of our finances and the possessions that we do happen to have. The last verse says this: in this way they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. So this is where we talked about in verse 6, the great gain, right? So this is the gain piece, okay? This is what Paul is getting at. You're not going to gain here necessarily on earth. That's not the focus. The focus is to put our hope in the Lord, and then when we do, we lay up treasure for ourselves in heaven. So for the coming age, we lay up things in this world, or that aren't of this world, in heaven, that we'll be able to see in that coming age. And then it says, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. This is the gain right here. This is the gain piece, the eternal inheritance that the Lord is preparing for you in the age to come. So again, I ask the same question I started with. What has your heart? What has your heart? What has your desires? Where is your mind at? When you wake up in the morning, what are you thinking about? Where is your heart? What has your heart? Is it the earthly things? Is it the money? Is it the success? Or is it putting your faith in God, putting your trust in God and saying, Lord, you do with me what you want to do? So I want you to discuss these 3 points with me. It says, discuss the kinds of things we might hold in higher regard than God's. What things, this is a moment to be a little bit honest and say, maybe I'm holding this thing above the Lord. What could that be in your life? Discuss how contentment can lead to godliness. When I'm content with what I have, how does that help me with my relationship with the Lord? And how does that help me to treat people better? And lastly, how stewardship can look in our everyday lives. What is it? There may be people listening right now that have a lot. There may be some of you that don't feel like you have a lot, but either way, you have something, you have things. And how can you steward those things in your everyday life? Well, I hope you enjoy discussing this evening, and thank you for taking the time to listen. God bless you.